Welcome to our special coverage of the Noor Salman trial right here on clickorlando.com. I'm Justin Warmoth. Today, jurors are hearing Noor Salman's side of the events leading up to the Pulse nightclub shooting. News 6's Nadine Yanis joins us live from the federal courthouse in downtown Orlando. And Nadine, we're learning Salman's lawyers filed a new motion to throw out the case against her.
They did. So this was an explosive motion filed late last night by her defense attorneys that basically says that they just found out this weekend that Omar Mateen's father, Sadiq Mateen, was a confidential informant with the FBI and that he was sending money to Turkey and Afghanistan up until just days before the shooting. Now, this is explosive, and the defense feels like because of this, they haven't been able to really prepare for their case, which they started today. We just heard from the family about this. You're going to hear from them in a second, but let's take you through what the motion alleges.
I am feeling confident this morning.
Noor Salman's attorney, Fritz Scheller, says he was confident of the day to come as he walked into court this morning. After late last night, he filed a motion asking for either dismissal of Salman's charges or for a mistrial altogether, alleging the government misled them about information they had on Omar Mateen's father. That motion revealing in an email sent to Salman's attorneys from prosecutors that Sadiq Mateen was an FBI confidential informant from 2005 to June of 2016. And that's not all. Salman's attorneys say a part of that email, they also learned Mateen's father is under criminal investigation for transferring money to Turkey and Afghanistan, sending money as late as June 5th, 2016. That's just days before the Pulse attack. Also, the motion shows back in 2012, the FBI got an anonymous tip alleging Sadiq Mateen was raising $50,000 to $100,000 for an attack against the Pakistani government. If you remember, Mateen's father was seen at a Hillary Clinton campaign rally months after the attack, and right after, condemned the actions of his son.
I am surprised and shocked. Why did he do that? I wish he was alive. I would ask him. Why did he do this? Salman's
attorneys are now asking for a mistrial, saying the government not telling them this information unfairly hindered their ability to look into other theories in their defense. Salman's family walking into court today, not stopping to talk to us like they usually do.
The truth will set you free.
And so it was just about maybe 5 or 10 minutes ago, a press conference wrapped up with Salman's family, and her uncle just said after hearing this information, he believes that the FBI is using his niece as a scapegoat, protecting one of their own, Omar Mateen's father, who is an FBI informant. Take a listen.
My niece, and they throwing her under the bus to cover something else. I know my niece from day one. I've been telling everybody she's innocent, and no way she will do something like that to hurt anybody. She will cry when she sees somebody she never met before here, and so some cover up. And I hope it's in the end it's gonna show us what's all behind it. Why they picked this poor girl.
How was it like for you?
And it's because of this information, Noor Salman's family wants her to be acquitted on all charges. The defense filing that motion again for either asking for a dismissal of her charges or at least a mistrial. The judge came in about 9:25 today, a little later. We were all sitting at the edge of our seats waiting to see if he was going to decide on the motion that the judge said it was going to take too long. They will discuss it later, putting it on the back burner for now. Justin.
And Nadine, I know the defense is moving quickly, calling its witnesses today. So who have we heard from so far?
So we've heard from several witnesses, including one that we've been expecting to hear from and wanting to hear from, who is known as the nickname only by Nemo. Now, this is the guy who Salman told the FBI agents that Omar told her he was having dinner with the night of the Pulse attack. Now, if you remember from Nemo's mother's testimony, Nemo was actually in medical school in Baltimore. He was nowhere near the state of Florida. So we heard Nemo's testimony, who said that oftentimes Omar Mateen would use Nemo as an excuse to tell Salman that he was with Nemo when in fact he was cheating with other women. And then right after we heard that testimony, the defense is trying to say that Salman actually believed that Omar was with Nemo that night. We then heard from mistresses with Omar Mateen. If you take a look, one of them we saw coming into court this morning. She testified that she met Omar Mateen on February of 2016, months before the Pulse attack, on Plenty of Fish, and that he came over to her apartment and they had a physical relationship. Now, the defense is using this again because they want to show that Omar would use Nemo as his own cover story when he would go out and cheat on women. Now, after she testified, we then started hearing from Noor Salman's childhood friends, two of them who we also saw walking into court this morning. The one that we heard from was someone that she grew up with. She was Christian and said that Noor was such a great mom. She also had trouble in school. She testified to that when they were kids. And she also said that Noor Salman failed her driver's license test several times, and she was excited when she finally passed that on June 8th. Now, the government alleges that when Noor Salman said that she got her driver's license on June 8th, that she was doing that to prepare for after Mateen's death. The government also alleges that Nemo was Noor Salman's cover story. So we're hearing a lot of witnesses on the defense's side today, and we're hearing a lot more about Noor Salman herself, and the jury finally getting a little bit of understanding of the kind of woman she is from her own friends and family. We'll break that down more as court continues. A very busy day in the Noor Salman trial, and then of course whatever that judge rules later on this afternoon on that motion of whether or not to acquit the charges or call for a mistrial. All that on News 6 starting at 4 today.
All right,
Justin.
Nadine, we will see you then. Thank you so much. Certainly an interesting day in courts. And let's bring in News 6 legal analyst Jason Johnson with the Lowndes Law Firm to break down more of this. First off, Jason, thank you so much for being here. All right, let's first go over this motion that was filed late last night. It's 22 pages by Salman's defense team. What do you make of it?
Well, it was filed very late last night, and I know that because I was on the court's docket as of about 11:15 p.m. last night, expecting to potentially find a motion by the defense to have Ms. Salman released on bond. They've indicated that they would be doing that given the court's consternation with the issues surrounding the allegations that she cased Pulse and that the government knows that not to be true. So I was expecting that motion, find out this morning that they filed a motion to dismiss the case or in the alternative for a mistrial. Half expected the court to take it up this morning, but I'm not surprised at all that the court decided to delay that. I doubt the government had a chance to even review it thoroughly, much less, formulate a response to it. It's an important motion. The judge is certainly going to want to give the government ample time to come up with its response, but also the jury was already on its way, didn't have a chance to really, let them know that their time would be delayed. And Judge Byron is very concerned about making sure that the jury doesn't sit around in idleness, that they're there for the important task of listening to witnesses, hearing evidence. So he didn't want to keep them waiting. So that's why he decided to handle it tonight.
Do you think by filing it that late, close to 11:45 at night, has some strategy to it?
No, I don't think so. I think they had been working on it since getting that email from Ms. Sweeney on Saturday afternoon. It is a lengthy motion. It sets forth their theories of why the case ought to be dismissed. And in essence, they make a couple of different arguments. In addition to, everybody knows about your Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can't be used against you. You also have other rights as a criminal defendant under the Constitution. And one of those, under the Fifth Amendment, is the right to due process. And another one is the right under the Sixth Amendment to a fair trial. And so their arguments are that by the government delaying providing this information to the defense, Ms. Salman's due process rights were violated, as was her right to a fair trial. The underlying theory is that had they known that Sadiq Mateen was a confidential informant for the FBI for 11 years, it would have changed their theories of the defense. It also would have provided some information that would have allowed them to change the way they cross-examine some of the government's witnesses, potentially impeach their credibility, and further develop their theories of the defense. Those are not weak arguments. This wasn't disclosed until after the prosecution had rested. The government rested its case, so they can't go back and re-cross-examine those witnesses. Certainly the government or the judge could give them leeway to bring everybody back and put them under recross. But, now we're talking about basically retrying the case.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. If I had to read the tea leaves, I would say that I don't expect that they will get a dismissal of the charges, but they've got a decent shot of getting a mistrial.
And you heard from her family. Is it fair to say that, that the government is using Noor Salman as a scapegoat, as the family said, as throwing her under the bus because of their guy essentially not letting them know that this was happening, that his son was planning some sort of attack?
Well, I expect the defense to say whatever they can to try to raise reasonable doubt. And really what they're saying outside of court is just a battle for public opinion in the press. Really what they need to do is be raising reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors to try to get her acquitted. But the fact that one of their alternative theories of the defense could be that, it wasn't Noor that was aiding and abetting, it was his father. And those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Mr. Mateen could have been aiding and abetting his son, or even conspiring with his son, and she still could have been aiding and abetting as well. Remember, she was not charged with conspiracy. She wasn't charged in planning everything and carrying out the attack. She was charged with aiding and abetting, which is simply taking some steps in furtherance of the crime. And I think the government has a sufficient amount of evidence to put that issue to the jury and let them decide, notwithstanding her written statements. And the defense, of course, wants to make a big issue that these statements aren't in her handwriting. Agent Enriquez wrote these down, but they leave out conveniently that she initialed before, at the beginning and end of every written paragraph, and then wrote handwritten notes at the end of each of these statements. So they're going to have a hard time, I think, convincing the jury that everything in there was false.
And they're going to be bringing in that false confession expert to testify. Hasn't happened just yet, but let's talk about some of the witnesses that the defense has called. What sort of a picture are they trying to paint of their client, the defense?
Well, they're just trying to elicit sympathy for her right now, that, she was a very nice woman who loved children and never had a harsh word to say about anybody. They're trying to kind of pull the teeth on this argument by the government that, hey, she really was a part of this and this was a horrific crime, that, her personality doesn't match up with that theory of the crime. So I think that's what they're trying to do right now. They're also trying to paint her as somebody who maybe is less able than the normal person by saying, she failed her driver's license test in California 7 or 8 times. They'll point to her diminished IQ. But when they bring on that expert witness about false confessions, they're going to try to raise issues about how long it took.
6 hours.
The fact that she was sleep deprived. She was very nervous. She found out that her husband had been killed. All these things that might lead her to falsely make some claims. And then, of course, they're going to point to the statement, the part of her written statement where she says, we cased pulse, which is demonstrably false from the forensic evidence.
And just to be clear, the jury has no idea that this motion was filed. So it is an elephant in the room for us and for the jury and for the defense. But for the jury itself, they just think that this is part of the day. The defense is calling witnesses. I do want to get your take on how quickly the defense is going through some of their witnesses that they've called.
Well, it's important you make an important point there that all the discussion last week about Judge Byron being a little bit irritated that the government continued to make these claims about Noor casing the Pulse nightclub when they knew the forensic evidence early on didn't support that. The jury doesn't know about any of that. The public knows about it because of your reporting, but the jury hasn't heard any of this. They didn't see the motion to acquit. They won't have seen this motion to dismiss or for a mistrial. The only knowledge they have that Sadiq Mateen was an FBI informant was through the testimony of the FBI agent this afternoon. But they indicated that they had 8 to 10 witnesses as part of their defense, and they're rapidly moving through those witnesses. So while they said they're going to take 2.5 days, expect their expert will take some time, but I expect that we're going to see this if the judge doesn't rule in favor of the defense on this new motion. I expect we'll see this go to the jury by the end of the week.
How important are closing arguments as we move forward and once the witnesses are called to have that final word? Obviously the government goes first.
Yes.
The defense will go second.
Correct.
How important are those closing arguments going to be to try to get their client off of the defense?
Well, they're very, very important for both sides. I mean, opening statements are extremely important as well, but the closing is where the government is going to kind of tidy everything up and put a neat little bow on it and serve it up to the jury and say, you know, here is your case, here's why she's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And then, of course, the defense's job is to try to say, you know, all you have to find is reasonable doubt. You don't have to find that it's beyond any shred of any possible, any possibility of it not happening. You just have to find one bit of reasonable doubt, and she must be acquitted if you find any reasonable doubt.
Quickly, I want to mention this. If the judge rules in favor of a mistrial, say, what's the timeline look as far as if he rules in favor of that? What happens next?
Well, the judge is going to bring everybody back and put in a new scheduling order, I think. I don't think it'll be too long before a retrial happens, but certainly the defense is going to have an opportunity to formulate its new theories. They'll have an opportunity to go out and interview their own witnesses. Wow. It'll take a little bit of time, but it's not going to be 2 years before the next trial.
Very interesting. We will be watching that very closely as the judge makes that ruling this afternoon. Jason Johnson with the Lowndes Law Firm, thank you so much for joining us. Again, just a reminder, because this is a federal trial, no cameras or recording devices are permitted inside the courtroom. But as you saw, Nadine is there. We have a team of reporters at the trial every day. They're updating a special page, and you are there right now. It's detailing everything that's happening in court. Just look for that Noor Salman tab. And join us again tonight at 6:30 for another discussion with News 6 anchor Lisa Bell, investigator Mike DeForest, and legal analyst Mark O'Mara. You can watch that live right here on clickorlando.com. I'm Justin Warmoth. For Jason Johnson with the Lowndes Law Firm, have a great afternoon. Take care.